Griffin Davenport had always been a man defined by his unyielding resolve and calculated ambition. From his earliest memories, he had been molded by a world where success was measured in cold, hard numbers and every decision was weighed against the potential cost of failure. Growing up in a modest household in a small Midwestern town, he learned early that feelings were luxuries one could ill afford. By the time he was a young adult, Griffin had carved out a niche for himself in the cutthroat world of business, founding Davenport Industries, a conglomerate that would eventually span multiple sectors and command respect in boardrooms across the country. Despite his meteoric rise to billionaire status, there was one domain in which Griffin remained inviolable: his heart. In the glittering halls of corporate power, where women were often seen as ornaments or opportunistic seekers, he maintained an unblemished record of rejection. Over the years, more than 150 would-be paramours had come and gone, each one dismissed with the clinical detachment of a man who believed that love was a weakness, a distraction that could derail his carefully orchestrated empire. His personal life, or lack thereof, was as meticulously managed as his business ventures. His nights were spent alone in his expansive penthouse, surrounded by the cold luxury of modern art and sleek furnishings, his only companions the quiet hum of his security system and the soft murmur of his private staff. Yet, beneath that steely exterior, a faint ember of longing had always smoldered, an ember he had long since convinced himself was best left unkindled. Every rejection, every dismissal, was a deliberate act of self-preservation, a barrier constructed to keep his heart from the unpredictable chaos of passion. The world outside his polished window was a canvas of fleeting emotions and ephemeral connections, and Griffin had chosen to insulate himself from it all, believing that his destiny lay solely in the realm of profit margins and strategic conquests. It was on a crisp autumn evening, as the wind whispered secrets through the high-rise canyons of the city, that fate began to unravel the tightly woven tapestry of his solitude. Griffin had been attending an exclusive charity gala, a necessary indulgence in the world of high finance where appearances were as important as achievements. The ballroom was awash in soft, golden light, and the air was filled with a gentle murmur of conversation, clinking glasses, and the distant strains of a live piano. Amid the sea of elegantly dressed socialites and influential figures, one presence began to stand out, a presence that would soon shatter his long-held beliefs about love and vulnerability. In the midst of that glittering crowd, Griffin's eyes were drawn to a woman whose aura was both captivating and enigmatic. She moved through the room with an effortless grace, her dark hair framing a face that radiated confidence and quiet intensity. Her eyes, bright and unafraid, met his gaze with a mixture of challenge and genuine curiosity. In that fleeting moment, the well-guarded fortress of Griffin's heart trembled ever so slightly. He had seen many women before, each one a fleeting distraction, momentary dalliance that would ultimately reinforce his resolve to remain unburdened by the complexities of romance. But this woman, with her penetrating stare and the subtle confidence that seemed to illuminate the room, stirred something deep within him that he had not felt in decades. For the rest of the evening, Griffin found himself inexplicably drawn to her. Every conversation he overheard, every smile exchanged in her direction, felt like a silent invitation to explore the forbidden territory of his own emotions. He spent the night oscillating between calculated detachment and an uncharacteristic, almost desperate, desire to approach her. Yet, even as he wrestled with these newfound impulses, his mind churned with the familiar refrain that had long guided him: love was an unpredictable liability, a risk he had meticulously avoided. Still, as the gala wore on, the spark in her eyes and the soft cadence of her laughter began to challenge that long-held creed. By the time the gala was drawing to a close, Griffin was left with a singular, overwhelming thought, a desire so foreign and yet so powerful that it threatened to consume him. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he resolved that this was not simply another passing fancy. There was something unique about her that defied his carefully curated world, a magnetic pull that made him want to risk everything for the chance to know her. In the silence of his luxurious penthouse that very night, as the city continued its ceaseless rhythm below, Griffin Davenport realized that the one night he might spend with this woman, whatever its form, could very well be the turning point that shattered his long-standing rule of rejecting love. And in that realization, the man who had once meticulously rejected every hopeful suitor began to wonder if perhaps, at last, he was ready to claim a love that might change him forever. The morning after the gala, Griffin Davenport awoke with a persistent echo of that enigmatic encounter. The dazzling lights and swirling music of the previous evening had faded into the quiet rhythm of his penthouse, but the memory of the woman lingered with an intensity that he could not ignore. Every detail of her presence, the confident tilt of her head, the determined glimmer in her eyes, even the subtle curve of her smile, replayed in his mind as if etched permanently into his memory. While the rest of the city slowly stirred to life, Griffin found himself adrift in introspection, questioning the very foundation of his lifelong aversion to intimacy. Unable to shake the overwhelming allure of this mysterious figure, he began to piece together fragments of information from the gala. Whispers among his trusted aides, fleeting mentions in conversation, and a few subtle hints during the event coalesced into an image of a woman who defied the shallow archetype he had always dismissed. Determined to learn more, Griffin quietly enlisted the help of his personal assistant to comb through the guest list and any available records from the charity event. Every new detail, her name, her professional accolades, even her subtle but unmistakable charisma, served to intensify his resolve. As the day progressed, Griffin's mind was consumed with thoughts of her. He found himself revisiting the elegant ballroom in his memory, replaying every moment until her eyes had met his, each second amplifying a newfound desire to step beyond the rigid boundaries he had long maintained. He began to realize that her presence was not just a fleeting distraction, it was a mirror reflecting parts of himself he had long suppressed. In the stillness of his luxurious office, surrounded by towering windows that offered a view of the bustling city below, he resolved that he must see her again, even if it meant shattering the carefully constructed walls of his solitude. That evening, Griffin arranged a private rendezvous at an upscale lounge known only to a select few in elite circles. The atmosphere was subdued yet elegant, with soft jazz floating through dimly lit corners and patrons engaged in quiet, measured conversation. It was here that he hoped to find her once more, to step into a world where the calculated metrics of business gave way to the raw spontaneity of human connection. Every minute of anticipation was both exhilarating and terrifying, a dangerous gamble for a man who had spent decades guarding his heart. When she finally appeared, as if drawn by an invisible thread, the world around him seemed to pause. Serafina Wilder, her name, he later learned, was spoken with admiration in circles of innovation and enterprise, entered the lounge with a quiet grace that defied the pretense of high society. Her presence radiated a blend of intelligence and warmth that struck a stark contrast to the cold efficiency of his everyday world. Clad in a sharply tailored dress that combined modern chic with subtle hints of vintage elegance, she moved with an assuredness that belied any pretense of fragility. Their initial conversation was measured, almost clinical, as if both were acutely aware of the stakes involved in this uncharted territory of emotion. Over a glass of finely aged scotch, they spoke of art, technology, and the evolving landscape of business, a dialogue that gradually revealed glimpses of their deeper selves. Griffin found himself captivated not only by her sharp intellect but by the sincerity that laced every word she spoke. Her laughter, gentle yet resonant, broke through the veneer of his guarded demeanor, and in her eyes he saw an invitation to embrace vulnerability without the fear of losing control. Throughout that long evening, as the city's ambient noise melded with the soft strains of live music, Griffin felt an unfamiliar stirring within him, a blend of hope and desperation that challenged the very core of his identity. The conversation shifted seamlessly from professional accomplishments to personal dreams and hidden regrets. In a moment of uncharacteristic candor, he revealed snippets of a past filled with ambition and isolation, a life governed by the relentless pursuit of success at the expense of genuine connection. In return, Serafina shared her journey of overcoming personal obstacles and redefining her identity in a world that often valued surface over substance. By the time the night drew to a close, both Griffin and Serafina found themselves suspended in a fragile, shared silence, a silence that spoke louder than any carefully rehearsed speech. As they parted ways beneath a starlit sky, a silent promise passed between them. This was not merely an incidental encounter, but the beginning of something profound and transformative. In that fleeting, charged moment, Griffin Davenport understood that his life, once governed solely by cold calculations and endless rejections, was now poised on the edge of an unexpected metamorphosis, a journey that might just lead him to claim a love he had never dared to imagine. After that fateful evening at the lounge, Griffin found himself unable to shake the overwhelming pull toward Serafina. As midnight approached and the city's pulse slowed to a gentle murmur beneath the neon glow, he arranged for her to join him at his penthouse, a decision made on impulse and tempered by an unfamiliar mixture of hope and trepidation. The penthouse, usually a sanctuary of solitude and meticulously curated opulence, was now transformed into a quiet stage for vulnerability. Soft ambient light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the gentle hum of the city below set a contemplative backdrop for what was to come. When Serafina arrived, her presence seemed to momentarily suspend time. Gone were the airs of calculated elegance and professional detachment that had so often defined her. Tonight, her eyes revealed a delicate openness that invited trust. They settled into a spacious sitting room where the furnishings, draped in rich fabrics and timeless design, offered a comfortable intimacy. With no agenda other than to explore the uncharted territories of their inner worlds, they began a conversation that would alter the course of both their lives. At first, their dialogue was tentative, measured questions and careful responses that hinted at a desire to protect their deepest vulnerabilities. Griffin, whose life had been dictated by logic and financial forecasts, found himself speaking of long-forgotten dreams and the quiet sorrows that lay hidden behind his public persona. He recounted moments from his childhood, a time when hope had once filled his heart before the weight of responsibility forced him into an existence defined solely by achievement. His voice, usually so precise and controlled, quavered as he revealed the isolation that success had wrought. Every word was a small defiance against the fortress he had built, a fortress that had kept him safe but also isolated. Serafina, equally unguarded, responded with her own mosaic of memories. She spoke of nights spent working in a cramped studio apartment, the glow of a single computer screen illuminating dreams that were both fragile and fiercely determined. She shared the bittersweet triumphs of carving her own path in a world that often demanded conformity, a world where she had learned to dance on the edge of vulnerability while shielding her heart from inevitable disappointments. As she spoke, her voice carried a blend of resilience and tenderness, each syllable etching new layers of authenticity into the space between them. Their conversation gradually deepened into a realm where business and personal ambition gave way to raw emotion. Griffin found himself asking questions he had never dared before. Have you ever felt that your past was holding you back from loving fully, and what would it mean to truly let someone in? In response, Serafina paused before admitting, I once believed that every scar was a reminder to remain guarded, that to love was to risk losing everything I had built. But tonight, with you, I wonder if there might be beauty in embracing that risk. The sincerity in her voice, coupled with the vulnerability etched across her features, stirred something profound within him. As the hours slipped by, the boundaries between them continued to dissolve. In a quiet moment, when the only sound was the steady rhythm of rain against the windowpane, Griffin reached out to gently clasp Serafina's hand. The contact was electric, a silent promise that transcended the clinical negotiations of boardrooms and business deals. In that single, unspoken gesture, the carefully maintained barriers around his heart began to crumble, revealing a raw, tender core that had long been hidden away. The night unfolded like a slow revelation. They moved from one room to another, each space in the penthouse becoming a canvas on which memories and confessions were painted with painstaking honesty. Over a late supper prepared in the sleek kitchen and shared in the glow of candlelight, they traded stories of triumph and heartbreak, of past mistakes and the quiet moments that had defined who they were. With each exchange, Griffin's resolve to keep his heart impervious weakened, replaced by an urgency to hold on to every fragment of this unexpected connection. Yet, amid the growing intimacy, a subtle tension lingered, a fragile awareness that what they were experiencing was both a blessing and a disruption to the lives they had so carefully built. Griffin's mind raced with the implications. His empire, built on the bedrock of indifference to romance, was now at a crossroads. Could he allow himself to be vulnerable without jeopardizing everything he had fought for? And for Serafina, whose life had been a constant balancing act between ambition and emotional survival, was this night the beginning of a future where she could finally surrender to love without fear? In the soft pre-dawn light, as the world outside began to stir once more, the conversation finally tapered into a reflective silence. They sat side by side on a plush sofa, each lost in thought, yet tethered by the undeniable bond forged during those hours. There was no need for elaborate promises or declarations in that quiet moment, only the tacit understanding that they had both glimpsed a version of themselves that had long been hidden behind the veneer of success and self-reliance. For Griffin Davenport, that night marked a pivotal turning point, a moment when the rigid contours of his carefully constructed life gave way to the unpredictable and often messy landscape of true connection. And for Serafina Wilder, it was a revelation that perhaps, after all the battles fought and the defenses raised, there could be a future defined not by solitude but by the shared warmth of a love that had the power to transform both hearts. In the delicate interplay of confessions, silences, and gentle touches, they began to understand that this night was more than just an encounter, it was the first step toward a destiny that neither had ever dared to imagine. As dawn broke over the city, a pale light seeped through the tall, arched windows of Griffin's penthouse, transforming the interior into a realm of quiet introspection. The soft glow of early morning revealed subtle changes in the room, shadows of the previous night that clung to the rich furnishings and whispered of confessions made in hushed tones. Griffin lay awake in his king-sized bed, the weight of the night's revelations lingering like a delicate perfume in the air. Every memory of Serafina's gentle laughter, every tender glance they had exchanged, reverberated in his mind. The passionate vulnerability they had shared was now mingling with an undercurrent of uncertainty and hope. Slowly, he rose from his bed, each step measured and deliberate, as if he were treading on a threshold between his old, impenetrable self and a future uncharted by emotion. In the quiet solitude of his private study, surrounded by books and relics that had once symbolized the certainty of his success, Griffin began to reflect on the seismic shift that had taken place. His thoughts wandered back to the intimate conversation they had shared the night before, confessions of lost dreams and hidden scars that he had long kept secret. There was an undeniable tenderness in her voice as she recounted the struggles of her past, and it stirred something in him that had remained dormant for far too long. Meanwhile, in the adjoining room, Serafina awoke to a similar quietude. The soft morning light revealed traces of vulnerability in the gentle rise and fall of her breath. She, too, was lost in reflection, recalling the fragile moments of trust that had blossomed in the intimacy of that night. Though the physical closeness they had shared had been raw and transformative, it was the emotional unveiling, the shedding of long-held defenses, that resonated most deeply with her. In her heart, she wondered if this newfound connection was a fleeting spark or the beginning of something enduring enough to defy the harsh realities of the world they both inhabited. Later that morning, as the city slowly stirred to life, Griffin and Serafina met in the expansive living room. The space, usually filled with the quiet hum of solitude and business-focused monotony, now buzzed with the unspoken promise of change. They greeted each other with a hesitant smile, each aware of the intimacy that had been laid bare during the night and the uncertainty that now lay ahead. Over cups of strong, freshly brewed coffee served in delicate porcelain, their conversation began tentatively, an attempt to navigate the labyrinth of emotions they had both embraced. Griffin broke the silence first, his tone soft yet resolute. "Last night, it changed something in me," he admitted, eyes fixed on the play of morning light across the polished floor. His voice, usually so controlled and impersonal, carried a tremor of vulnerability that surprised even him. Serafina listened intently, nodding as if in silent agreement, before responding with equal candor. "I've spent so much time guarding myself, building walls around every part of me that I thought was too fragile to show. But with you, for one night, I felt free." Her words, whispered almost as if they were a secret meant only for them, hung in the air like a promise. Their conversation slowly deepened, evolving from cautious recollections of the past to tentative dreams of a shared future. They talked about the impossibility of predicting life's twists and turns, about the scars they had both acquired through years of emotional isolation, and about the possibility that perhaps the one night they had shared was not just a transient anomaly but a glimpse of something greater, a chance to rewrite the rules of their lives. Each word, each pause, served to further dissolve the barriers that had once separated them. In the quiet spaces between sentences, there was a sense of possibility, a budding hope that the painful solitude of their past could give way to a future defined by compassion and mutual trust. Outside, the city's rhythm gradually picked up, yet inside, time seemed to slow down, allowing them to savor the raw truth of their newfound connection. In that intimate atmosphere, every detail of their surroundings, the soft murmur of the air conditioner, the distant honk of early morning traffic, even the way the light played upon the antique furniture, became a part of the larger tapestry of their shared experience. Griffin's mind, which had once been so dominated by numbers and profit margins, now buzzed with questions he had never dared to ask. Could love, in its unpredictable and sometimes painful form, be the one venture truly worth risking? And could he, a man who had so long rejected every hopeful suitor, find solace and strength in surrendering to something as elusive as emotion? As the morning stretched into a gentle afternoon, the two continued their quiet exploration of what it meant to be vulnerable and open. With every shared story, every laugh that echoed softly through the room, and every tear that glistened briefly in the early light, Griffin and Serafina inched closer to a truth that was as exhilarating as it was terrifying. They recognized that this was not merely the aftermath of a single, life-altering night, it was the start of a journey into a realm where hearts could be healed, where trust could be rebuilt, and where the possibility of true connection was no longer a distant dream but a tangible reality. In that delicate, transformative space, the boundaries between business and personal faded away, leaving only the raw, unfiltered essence of who they were. And as the day wore on, both understood that their lives were poised on the brink of a profound metamorphosis, a future where the lessons of vulnerability might finally pave the way for a love that could change everything. That evening, as dusk settled and the city's neon glow began to shimmer against the darkening sky, the tranquility of Griffin's penthouse was shattered by an unexpected knock at the door. The sound, abrupt and insistent, jolted him from the reflective calm he had spent the day nurturing. He opened the door to find a courier holding a thick, unmarked envelope. The envelope, worn by time and travel, bore no return address, only a simple insignia that neither he nor his inner circle recognized. With a mix of curiosity and trepidation, Griffin brought it inside and, after a brief moment of hesitation, opened it in the privacy of his study. Inside, he discovered a collection of aged documents and photographs, their edges frayed and ink faded by decades. As he carefully unfolded a yellowed letter, a chill ran down his spine. The letter was addressed to him in a flowing script that his mother used to write with, a signature style that evoked memories of a past he had long since buried. The letter detailed events from his youth, a secret romance, a broken promise, and an unexpected betrayal that had set him on the path to his current isolation. It hinted at a mystery within his family's history, one that was intertwined with the very foundation of the empire he had built. Every word seemed to echo with sorrow and regret, stirring feelings he had carefully locked away behind layers of corporate detachment. Griffin's mind raced as he pieced together the fragments of a story he had never known, a story of a woman who had once held his heart in a way that defied the cold logic of business. The documents spoke of clandestine meetings in moonlit gardens, whispered vows of eternal fidelity, and the painful consequences of a love deemed too dangerous for the world of commerce and power. As he continued reading, his hands trembled with a mix of anger and longing. For the first time in his life, the polished veneer of his empire began to crack, revealing the raw, unhealed wounds of his past. The secrets his mother had kept hidden for so long now surged forth, threatening to upend the carefully ordered life he had constructed. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Griffin, Serafina had been battling her own demons. In the solitude of her modest apartment, she reread old journal entries that chronicled the struggles and triumphs of her early career. There was one entry in particular that kept resurfacing, a passage filled with cryptic hints about her own past, suggesting a connection to a powerful legacy she had always felt drawn to but never fully understood. Her eyes filled with tears as she recalled a promise made in desperation, a promise to reclaim the dignity stolen from her by circumstances beyond her control. It was as if fate had conspired to bring their hidden histories to light simultaneously, weaving their destinies together in ways neither had anticipated. That very night, Griffin and Seraphina found themselves in an unexpected conversation that bridged the gap between their present and the shadows of their pasts. In the quiet solitude of a private restaurant overlooking the city's skyline, Griffin hesitated before revealing the contents of the mysterious envelope. His voice, usually so firm and controlled, wavered as he recounted the painful revelations etched in the faded pages. Seraphina listened intently, her eyes darkening with a mixture of empathy and shock. Slowly, she admitted that she, too, had harbored secrets, pieces of a puzzle that now seemed to resonate with the very heart of his revelations. In that charged moment, under the soft glow of candlelight and the distant hum of the city below, the two found themselves united by the shared burden of past betrayals and lost promises. Their conversation stretched late into the night, a raw and unfiltered exploration of wounds that had long defined them. The unveiling of secrets, though painful, became a turning point, a moment when the walls each had built began to crumble, allowing the fragile possibility of healing to seep in. It was the night when trust was both broken and forged anew, and when the promise of a future built on truth began to outshine the shadows of a haunting past. Later that week, after the tumultuous revelations and the raw, emotional confessions at the restaurant, Griffin and Seraphina found themselves at a crossroads, a fragile junction between the past's haunting secrets and the promise of a future yet to be written. Determined to reclaim what had been shattered, they agreed to meet in the quiet refuge of Griffin's private library, a grand, dimly lit room lined with centuries-old volumes and relics of family legacy, where the weight of history mingled with the possibility of redemption. The library, with its high-arched ceilings and the soft glow of antique lamps, set the stage for an evening of deep introspection and tentative healing. Griffin sat in a worn leather armchair near a grand fireplace, his eyes scanning the spines of books that had witnessed generations of triumphs and heartbreaks. The silence was palpable, a silence that promised both solace and the opportunity for confession. Soon, Seraphina entered, her steps measured and her gaze determined yet tender. She carried with her a sense of vulnerability that, despite the scars of her past, radiated hope. They began by revisiting the painful memories that had been unearthed in the mysterious envelope. With voices low and unhurried, Griffin recounted the details of the faded letter, a confession from a mother he had long believed had kept him isolated from the possibility of genuine love. His words, heavy with regret and longing, resonated in the quiet space, while Seraphina listened with a mix of empathy and quiet understanding. In turn, she shared her own painful recollections, stories of betrayals in a cutthroat world, moments when she had felt utterly alone, and the relentless drive to forge a new identity amidst chaos. Their stories, once hidden behind stoic facades, now spilled forth like ink on parchment, each revelation bridging the gap between two wounded souls. As the hours passed, the conversation gradually shifted from recounting old hurts to exploring the possibility of healing. They pored over dusty records and family albums that lay scattered on a long oak table, piecing together fragments of history that had shaped their lives in unexpected ways. In one faded photograph, Griffin discovered an image of a young woman who bore a striking resemblance to Seraphina, a revelation that sent shockwaves through his carefully guarded heart. Was it possible that fate had interwoven their destinies long before their paths crossed at the gala? The possibility added a layer of mystique to their already tangled emotions, prompting them to consider that perhaps their meeting was not mere coincidence, but the culmination of a long-hidden design. In a particularly poignant moment, Griffin retrieved a small, ornate diary from a forgotten shelf, a diary belonging to his late mother. With trembling fingers, he read aloud entries that spoke of forbidden love and the sacrifices made in the name of duty. The words painted a vivid picture of a time when love was both an act of rebellion and a source of profound healing. As he read, his voice broke with emotion, and Seraphina reached out, her hand gently covering his. The simple gesture carried the promise of shared strength, of two people willing to face their collective ghosts together. Their conversation soon evolved into a mutual pledge to rebuild trust, both in each other and in themselves. They discussed the daunting challenge of letting go of the old wounds that had defined them, acknowledging that true healing required not only forgiveness of others but also of oneself. In that softly lit library, surrounded by the echoes of past generations, Griffin and Serafina made a silent vow to embark on a journey of transformation, to honor the scars that had brought them together while daring to dream of a future unburdened by the weight of betrayal. The night deepened, and as the fire cast dancing shadows on the walls, they began to craft tentative plans for moving forward. They spoke of collaborative projects that merged their unique talents, a blend of corporate acumen and innovative vision that promised to redefine not only their personal lives but the very future of their respective enterprises. Each idea was met with cautious optimism, and every shared laugh, even in the midst of uncertainty, became a stepping stone toward a renewed sense of hope. In that long, soul-searching evening, the library transformed from a repository of the past into a crucible for rebirth. The painful revelations of Chapter 5, once a source of disillusionment, now served as the raw material for a new beginning, a beginning built on the fragile, yet resilient, foundations of trust and shared vulnerability. As dawn approached and the first hints of light crept through the tall windows, Griffin and Serafina sat in quiet companionship, their hearts lighter and their resolve stronger. They understood that the road to healing would be long and fraught with challenges, but in that intimate space, they had taken the first courageous step toward reclaiming a future where love was not a liability, but the very force that could set them free. In the days following their heartfelt promises to rebuild trust, an undercurrent of mystery began to stir in the corridors of Griffin's ancestral estate, a secret that would challenge everything they had come to believe about their intertwined destinies. One crisp evening, as the twilight deepened into a velvety dusk, Griffin found himself drawn once more to the secluded wing of the mansion where relics of his family's past were stored in dusty archives and forgotten vaults. With Serafina by his side, they embarked on a meticulous search for clues that might shed light on the inexplicable resemblance they had discovered in an old photograph, a resemblance that hinted at a connection deeper than mere chance. Their exploration led them to a hidden room behind a faded portrait of an ancestor whose eyes seemed to follow their every move. The room was small, its walls lined with ancient ledgers, brittle letters, and delicate trinkets that exuded the weight of generations. In the center of the room, tucked away in a battered wooden chest, lay a collection of personal diaries and correspondence that had belonged to Griffin's late mother. With trembling anticipation, Griffin carefully opened one of the diaries, its pages filled with looping script that recounted a life of sacrifice, love, and forbidden alliances. As Serafina pored over a bundle of letters, she uncovered an entry that sent a chill through her, a passage in which Griffin's mother had spoken of a secret pact made decades ago between the Davenport and Wilder families. The words described an arrangement born of desperation and hope, a promise that, should the two families ever face ruin, a union between their heirs would serve to heal old wounds and secure a future founded on mutual respect and shared destiny. The revelation was staggering. Not only did it suggest that Griffin and Serafina might have been destined to cross paths long before their chance encounter at the charity gala, but it also hinted at a legacy of love that had been deliberately hidden from the world. In the flickering candlelight of that hidden archive, time seemed to slow as they absorbed the magnitude of the discovery. Griffin's eyes widened with a mixture of disbelief and sorrow as he read his mother's heartfelt words, a confession of regret for secrets kept and a fervent hope that one day, her lineage might find redemption in a love untainted by ambition and isolation. Serafina, her hands steadied despite the emotional storm within, realized that her own journey, filled with battles against corporate betrayal and personal sacrifice, might have been intricately woven into a tapestry she had never suspected existed. The revelation ignited a torrent of emotions. For Griffin, the diary's contents were both a balm and a wound reopened, a confirmation that the very foundation of his relentless, solitary existence had been built on unresolved pain and missed opportunities for genuine connection. He recalled the nights he had spent rejecting every potential partner, not out of disdain but from a deeply ingrained fear of repeating the loss and heartache his mother had once suffered. Now, as he stared at the faded ink and heartfelt confessions on those fragile pages, He understood that every rejection had been a misguided attempt to protect himself from a legacy that was as much a curse as it was a promise. Serafina, too, felt the weight of the past settling upon her. In her own hands, she held the remnants of a destiny that seemed to stretch back generations, a destiny that might have guided her to Griffin long before either of them had dared to dream of a different future. The secret pact between the families was not just a relic of bygone days, it was a living testament to the possibility that love, even when shrouded in mystery and sacrifice, could emerge as a transformative force. The letters, the diary, and the long-forgotten promises all converged to create a picture of fate that was as intricate as it was profound. In the silent aftermath of their discovery, Griffin and Serafina sat together amidst the relics of history, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the candle. There were no grand declarations, only a shared, unspoken understanding that their meeting was more than an accidental encounter. It was a fulfillment of a promise made long ago, a promise that transcended the cold calculations of business and the barriers of personal loss. The secrets of the past, once locked away in dusty pages and hidden compartments, now bound them together with a power that was both humbling and exhilarating. They spent hours discussing the implications of the pact, debating whether destiny had truly orchestrated their union or if the weight of legacy was simply a burden they now had to bear. As the night deepened, they made a pact of their own, a silent vow to honor the legacy that had brought them together, to embrace the pain of the past as a stepping stone toward a future built on truth and shared hope. In that moment, the mansion's hidden chamber became a sanctuary not of sorrow, but of possibility, a place where the scars of yesterday could be transformed into the foundation of a love that was destined to heal even the deepest wounds. Thus, with the secrets of the Davenport and Wilder families laid bare before them, Griffin and Serafina stepped out of the hidden room with hearts both heavy and hopeful. The journey ahead promised challenges and uncertainties, but also the potential for a redemption that was as shocking as it was beautiful. And in that long, transformative night, they embraced the notion that love, even when born of ancient promises and hidden legacies, could be the catalyst for a future where both their souls might finally find the healing they had so long sought. On a brisk spring morning, when the first blush of sunlight spilled over the horizon and the world outside seemed poised for rebirth, Griffin and Serafina found themselves standing on the manicured terrace of his ancestral estate. The events of the past weeks, the clandestine revelations, the painful admissions, and the stirring of long-forgotten legacies, had led them here, to this decisive moment. The weight of history and destiny hung in the air as tangibly as the scent of blooming cherry blossoms, and both knew that nothing would ever be the same again. In the days following their discovery of the secret pact between the Davenport and Wilder families, a quiet determination had grown in their hearts. They had delved deep into the archives of old journals, letters, and photographs, piecing together the story of a promise made long ago, a promise that had set the course of their families and, ultimately, their own lives. Every fragment of forgotten memory had been a reminder of sacrifices endured and wounds left unhealed. But now, facing the raw truth of their intertwined destinies, they saw an opportunity for redemption and transformation. That morning on the terrace, surrounded by the gentle murmur of nature and the soft rustling of leaves, Griffin took a deep breath and reached out for Serafina's hand. The gesture was both an invitation and a declaration, a silent vow that the legacy of pain and rejection was being replaced by a future founded on mutual trust, courage, and unyielding love. He spoke softly, his voice carrying the resolve of a man who had finally learned that true strength was found in vulnerability. Today, he said, we claim our future. We honor the past not by being shackled to its sorrows, but by transforming every scar into a beacon of hope. Serafina's eyes glistened with a mixture of determination and tender warmth as she squeezed his hand in affirmation. In that quiet moment, they decided to publicly embrace the legacy that had unexpectedly bound them together. Together, they organized a small, intimate ceremony, a gathering of the few trusted confidants and family members who had supported them through the tumult. The venue was the estate's garden, an ethereal space where carefully tended roses and ancient oaks formed a living tapestry of resilience and renewal. Under an archway festooned with fresh blooms and soft drapery, the couple exchanged personal vows that transcended the cold contracts of their former lives. Griffin's vow was a promise to shed the remnant of the old self, a man who had once rejected over 100 suitors in a desperate attempt to preserve a fortress of solitude, and to embrace the unpredictable, messy, and profoundly beautiful nature of true connection. He recalled the painful lessons of his past and declared that every rejection, every solitary night, had prepared him to fully appreciate the gift of love that Serafina had awakened in him. Serafina, with a quiet intensity, vowed to let go of the burdens of secrecy and the scars of a world that had once tried to confine her. She spoke of the sacrifices she had made to survive and thrive in a ruthless corporate landscape, and now, in the face of destiny, she promised to build a life where ambition was balanced by compassion and personal truth. Her words resonated with a fierce, unyielding passion, affirming that their union was not merely a convergence of fortunes but a deliberate choice to transform legacy into something living and luminous. As their vows were sealed with a tender, heartfelt kiss, the assembled guests witnessed a symbolic turning point, a metamorphosis that fused the past and the future into one breathtaking present. The ceremony, understated yet profound, radiated an energy of reconciliation and forward motion. Every whispered congratulation, every tear of joy, affirmed that love, despite its unpredictable twists and the shadows of ancient secrets, could be a force for profound healing and rebirth. Later that evening, as twilight descended and the estate was bathed in the soft glow of lanterns and starlight, Griffin and Serafina walked hand in hand through the garden. The air was filled with a sense of quiet celebration, and each step they took was a commitment to the journey ahead. In the gentle darkness, they spoke in low, hopeful tones about plans for the future, a future where their shared legacy would be transformed into a living testament of love's redemptive power. In that final, transformative night, as the world around them whispered promises of new beginnings, Griffin and Serafina embraced the truth that their union was no accident. It was a destiny reimagined, a love that had risen from the ashes of rejection, betrayal, and hidden secrets to claim forever what had always been meant to be.